in a remote rural region of Thailand, where sugarcane fields stretch to the horizon and night falls faster than a held breath. There is a village where outsiders rarely dare to stay after dark. People say that babies are still born there, but after their 1-month blessing, no one ever hears them cry again. Not because they sleep peacefully, but because some souls were never allowed to leave. This is the story of infants held between two worlds, and the terrible price paid when the living tried to keep a spirit from departing. Chapter 1. The Village Without Lullabies. Ban Nong Phai lay hidden beyond miles of sunburned sugarcane fields, where the air shimmered with heat by day and turned unnaturally still after dusk. The road leading into the village narrowed into cracked dirt long before the first wooden houses appeared. As if the land itself resisted visitors. Even the birds seemed reluctant to cross the boundary. They circled overhead and veered away, leaving the sky oppressively empty. Outsiders rarely came. Those who did often left before nightfall, claiming the place felt wrong in ways they could not explain. The villagers, in turn, rarely left. Generations were born, lived, and died here, bound to the soil by something deeper than tradition. When asked why, they only smiled thinly and changed the subject. At first glance, Ban Nong Phai appeared like any rural settlement, small shrines at crossroads, faded spirit houses draped with marigolds, dogs dozing beneath stilted homes. Yet a peculiar silence hung over the village, thick as humidity before a storm. It was not the peaceful quiet of countryside life. It was a silence that felt enforced, as if sound itself had been warned away. The strangeness became most apparent at night. In neighboring villages, darkness brought familiar comforts: crickets singing, wind whispering through bamboo, mothers humming lullabies to restless infants. But in Ban Nong Phai, when the sun slipped behind the cane fields and the last cooking fires dimmed, a suffocating stillness took hold. Doors were barred early, oil lamps were lowered, conversations shrank to whispers, then ceased altogether. No lullabies were ever heard. Women still gave birth. Midwives still hurried through the night carrying bowls of hot water and bundles of cloth. Newborn cries pierced the darkness when life first entered the world, thin, fragile wails that reassured the living that another soul had arrived safely. But after the 1-month blessing ceremony, the sounds stopped. Not faded. Stopped. No midnight crying. No soft cooing. No restless fussing before dawn. Nothing. When asked, mothers would say their babies slept well. Too well. Their smiles did not reach their eyes. Travelers who stayed overnight sometimes awoke in panic, convinced they had gone deaf. They would sit upright on thin mattresses, straining to hear something, anything, to prove the world still existed beyond their own breathing. Instead, they heard only the pounding of their hearts. And, on certain nights when the air grew damp and the wind died completely, some swore they heard a sound beneath the silence, a faint, muffled whimper, as though something deep under the earth was trying to cry but could not draw breath. By morning, the villagers would insist no such sound existed. Just the wind in the cane, they would say. But the cane fields did not move. Chapter 2. The House at the Edge of the Cane Fields. Kanya arrived in Ban Nong Phai just before sunset, when the light turned the sugarcane fields into a sea of dull copper blades swaying without sound. The bus driver refused to enter the village and dropped her at the dirt road, muttering a hurried blessing before speeding away as though night itself were chasing him. She stood alone with one suitcase and the slow, heavy weight of 7 months of pregnancy pressing against her spine. The path to her childhood home cut through rows of cane that rose taller than a man. The leaves scraped against each other with a dry, papery hiss, yet the air remained strangely windless. Each step forward felt like walking into a place that had been waiting. Her mother's house stood at the very edge of the village, the last structure before the fields swallowed the land whole. Raised on wooden stilts darkened by age and rot, it leaned slightly, as if exhausted from standing too long. The windows were shuttered, no light seeped through the cracks. Even in daylight, the house seemed to absorb brightness rather than reflect it. Kanya had not returned since childhood. Her mother had insisted she stay in the city, far from the village. Letters arrived every few months, always brief, always urging her not to come back. Now the letters had stopped. And the funeral had already passed. As she climbed the creaking steps, the boards groaned under her weight with a hollow sound that echoed beneath the floor. As though the space below were deeper than it should be. The front door resisted when she pushed it open, then gave way with a long, splintering sigh. Inside, the air smelled of dust, dried herbs, and something faintly sweet, like spoiled milk left too long in heat. The silence pressed against her ears. No insects. No birds. No distant voices. Only the slow, wet thud of her own heartbeat. She placed a hand over her belly. The baby stirred restlessly, then kicked, hard, as if recoiling from something unseen. A sudden knock on the doorframe made her flinch. An elderly neighbor stood outside, her thin figure draped in black cotton. Deep lines carved her face, but her eyes remained sharp and unblinking. "You came back," the woman said. Her voice was flat, without welcome. Kanya nodded. "I have nowhere else." The woman's gaze drifted to Kanya's swollen belly. The muscles around her mouth tightened. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the old woman stepped backward off the stairs, as if careful not to cross the threshold. "Do not give birth here," she said. The words were not advice. They were a warning. Before Kanya could respond, the woman turned and walked away into the dimming light. She did not look back. The cane leaves closed behind her, swallowing her shape until it seemed she had never been there at all. Darkness arrived quickly. Inside the house, the floorboards ticked and shifted as the night cooled, each sound sharp in the suffocating quiet. Kanya lit an oil lamp, its weak flame throwing long, trembling shadows that crawled along the walls like slow-moving fingers. Beneath her feet, something tapped once. A soft, hollow knock from under the floor. She froze. The baby inside her kicked again, harder this time, followed by a slow, twisting pressure that made her breath catch. The knock did not repeat. But as she stood there in the dim yellow light, she could not shake the sensation that the darkness below the house was not empty. That something beneath the floorboards had heard her arrive, and was now awake.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Cry Beneath the Floor. Night in Ban Nong Phai did not fall, it sealed itself over the land. After extinguishing the lamp, Kanya lay on the thin mattress beneath the mosquito net, staring into darkness so complete it felt like cloth pressed against her eyes. The house had grown colder, though no wind entered through the shuttered windows. The silence pressed down on her chest, heavy enough to make each breath feel borrowed. She tried to sleep. The baby shifted restlessly inside her, not the gentle rolling motion she had grown used to, but sharp, sudden jolts, like flinches. Outside, nothing moved. Then she heard it. A faint sound. So soft she first mistook it for the ringing inside her own ears. A whimper. It came again, thin, breathless, strangled. A newborn's cry, smothered before it could fully form. Kanya sat upright, heart hammering. The mosquito net brushed her face like cobwebs. She held her breath and listened. Silence. Then, a weak, broken sob rose from beneath the floorboards. Not outside. Not beyond the walls. Directly below her. Her skin prickled. A cold pressure crawled up her spine as if icy fingers were tracing each vertebra. "No," she whispered, though she did not know who she was answering. The cry came again, longer this time, dragging through the dark like something with too little air in its lungs. It trembled with helpless desperation, the sound of something that did not understand why it could not breathe. Her belly tightened sharply. The baby inside her kicked, once, twice, then held still, as if listening. Kanya swung her feet onto the wooden floor. The boards were colder than stone. When she stood, the house responded with a low, hollow resonance that vibrated up through her bones. The crying stopped. She waited. Nothing. Only the heavy pounding of her pulse in her throat. Then, slowly, a soft scraping sound began beneath her. Not random. Not settling wood. Something dragging across packed earth. A slow, uneven movement, circling beneath the spot where she stood. Her breath hitched. She forced herself to step backward. The sound followed. A faint, wet rustle. Then a dull knock. Directly beneath her right foot. Kanya stumbled away. A strangled cry caught in her throat. The baby convulsed violently inside her, sending a flash of pain through her abdomen so sharp she nearly collapsed. From below, the muffled crying returned, louder now. No longer distant, no longer faint. It sounded closer. Closer than the thickness of the floor. Closer than the space between breaths. Her gaze dropped to the wooden planks. For one impossible instant, she thought she saw the surface bulge upward, as though something soft pressed against it from below. The crying stopped. A long, shuddering silence filled the room. Then, from directly beneath her, a whisper seeped through the cracks in the wood, thin as escaping air. "Mother." The word dissolved into a wet, choking sob. Kanya clapped her hands over her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Tears blurred her vision. Her body trembled violently, yet she could not move, could not flee, could not look away from the floor that separated her from whatever lay beneath. Inside her womb, the baby shifted slowly, deliberately, as if turning toward the voice below. And in the suffocating darkness, Kanya realized with growing horror. The crying was no longer coming from under the house alone. It was echoing inside her. Chapter 4. The Bundle Beneath the Boards. Dawn arrived without birdsong. A dull gray light seeped through the shutters, revealing a thin film of dust suspended in the air. Kanya had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the phantom pressure of something shifting beneath the floor. Listening, waiting. The silence of morning felt no less oppressive than the night. Her back throbbed. Her abdomen felt tight and heavy. The skin stretched as if from within by restless fingers rather than a growing child. When the baby moved now, it did not feel like gentle life. It felt like resistance. She told herself she had imagined the crying. Villages creak, wood settles, animals burrow beneath houses. But the memory of the whisper still clung to her skin like cold sweat. Mother. By mid-morning, unable to bear the uncertainty, she found a rusted hammer in the storage shed and returned to the bedroom. The floorboards there were warped and darkened with age. One plank near the center bore deep scratches, as though something heavy had been dragged repeatedly across its surface. Her stomach tightened as she knelt. The baby shifted sharply. "Just wood," she whispered. "Just wood." She wedged the hammer's claw beneath the edge of the plank and pulled. The nail shrieked as it resisted, the sound splitting the silence like a scream muffled underwater. Sweat slid down her temples. The wood groaned but did not give. She tried again. This time the plank tore free with a cracking snap that echoed hollowly beneath the house. A breath of air rose from the darkness below. It smelled of damp soil, stale incense, and something sweet-sour. Like milk left to rot inside a sealed jar. Kanya gagged and covered her mouth. Beneath the opening lay compacted earth, darker than the surrounding ground. At first she saw nothing unusual, only dirt packed flat and dry. Then she noticed the cloth. A corner of faded red fabric protruded from the soil, stiff with age and crusted with something blackened and brittle. Her pulse roared in her ears as she reached down. The moment her fingers touched the cloth, the baby inside her lurched violently. Pain speared through her abdomen, forcing a gasp from her throat. The movement felt less like a kick and more like a recoil, as if the child within her were trying to pull away from her hand. She froze, breath trembling. Then slowly, with shaking fingers, she pulled the bundle free. It was small, no larger than two cupped hands. The red cloth had once been bright but was now dulled to the color of dried blood. A thin cord bound it in careful knots, each loop tightened with ritual precision. The smell intensified. Rot and sweetness. Decay and incense. Her fingers trembled as she loosened the cord. The cloth peeled back with a dry, whispering sound. Inside lay gray ash mixed with clotted grains of hardened wax. Tangled within it were strands of fine black hair, curled and delicate. And something else. Tiny crescent shapes. At first she did not understand. Then realization struck like ice water poured down her spine. They were fingernails. Infant fingernails, translucent and impossibly small. Kanya dropped the bundle with a strangled cry. It struck the floor with a soft, dense thud, releasing a faint puff of gray dust that shimmered in the thin morning light. The baby inside her convulsed again, sending a wave of pressure across her belly. The skin tightened visibly, as if something beneath it had pressed outward. A low vibration rose from the open space beneath the floor, not a sound exactly, but a resonance felt through the wood, through her knees, through her bones. The ash inside the bundle shifted, just slightly, as though disturbed by breath. Kanya scrambled backward, her palms slipping on the dusty boards. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker, the light dimmer. From the hole in the floor, a faint warmth drifted upward, damp and organic, like the exhale of something buried too long underground. Then came the sound. A soft, congested inhale, followed by the faintest suggestion of a cry. Not loud, not desperate, but close enough that she could feel it vibrate inside her womb. Her hands flew to her belly. The baby moved slowly, deliberately, pressing outward beneath her skin, as if turning toward the opening in the floor. The red bundle lay between them, and in the suffocating stillness of the room, Kanya understood with rising terror. This was not buried. It had been kept.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Monk Who Refused the Offering. The temple of Ban Nong Phai stood on a low rise at the far end of the village, where the sugarcane fields parted as if unwilling to grow closer. The path leading uphill was lined with cracked stone lanterns, their soot-blackened tops suggesting they had once burned continuously, and then, abruptly, stopped. No birds perched on the temple roof. No incense smoke drifted from the prayer hall. Even the wind seemed to weaken as it approached the grounds. Kanya climbed the steps slowly, one hand supporting the weight of her belly, the other clutching the red bundle wrapped now in a plastic bag. She had tried to leave it behind. Each time she set it down, a tightening pressure gripped her abdomen until she could barely breathe. So she carried it. The wooden doors of the prayer hall stood half open. Inside, the air was cool and dim. A single oil lamp flickered before a soot-darkened Buddha statue whose gold leaf had peeled away in patches, revealing dull metal beneath. The scent of old incense lingered, mixed with damp stone and something faintly metallic. An elderly monk knelt on the floor. His back, thin beneath saffron robes, faded nearly brown with age. His head was bowed, lips moving silently over prayer beads worn smooth from decades of touch. He stopped before she spoke. "You should not have brought that here," he said without turning. His voice was brittle, like dry leaves crushed in the hand. Kanya's throat tightened. "I found it under my mother's floor." The monk slowly turned. His eyes fell upon the bundle. For a moment, the air seemed to withdraw from the room. He did not reach for it. Instead, he recoiled, not dramatically, but with a subtle shift backward that carried more fear than any cry. "Who told you to open it?" he asked. "No one." Silence stretched between them, thick and uneasy. The baby inside her pressed outward, a slow, firm pressure beneath her ribs. Kanya inhaled sharply. The monk's gaze moved to her stomach. His expression darkened. "How many nights have you heard them?" he asked. Her voice barely formed. "Since I arrived." He closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself. When he spoke again, his tone had changed, no longer questioning, but resigned. "Long ago, sickness took the infants of this village," he said. "They died before their first month. Breath failed them, milk turned in their stomachs. Mothers buried more children than they could name." His fingers tightened around the prayer beads. "A wandering ritual master came from the borderlands." He spoke of protection. He said the village was under a hungry shadow, that unseen forces fed upon newborn breath. The oil lamp flickered. Kanya felt the bundle grow warm in her hands. "He taught them aright." The monk continued. "When an infant died, its essence could be bound, held between ash, hair, and bone fragments, sealed with script older than the language of this land. The bound soul would remain, guarding the living children from the shadow that hunted them." His voice lowered, and the deaths stopped. The silence that followed was not relief. It was weight. Kanya swallowed. "Then, it protected them." The monk's eyes lifted slowly to meet hers. Protection is never free. The flame of the oil lamp guttered violently, though no wind stirred. The bound souls did not depart. He said, they lingered, unable to breathe, unable to sleep, unable to forget hunger. A dull pressure pulsed through the bundle. Kanya nearly dropped it. They began to cry beneath the houses. He whispered. Only the mothers heard them at first. Then the pregnant women. Then the unborn. Her pulse roared in her ears. The rite was meant to be temporary. He continued. But fear makes people cling to what they believe keeps them safe. They did not release the spirits. The monk's voice thinned. And so the guardians became prisoners. The baby inside Kanya shifted, not violently now, but with slow insistence, pressing downward as if drawn by gravity that did not belong to this world. What happens to the mothers? She asked. The monk did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached forward and slid the bundle toward himself, but stopped just short of touching it. They begin to hear voices in the womb. He said softly. They feel movement that does not belong to the child they carry. Their dreams fill with mouths that cannot breathe. The oil flame dimmed. Outside, the world felt impossibly distant. If the bound spirits sense a new life, he said, they seek warmth. Kanya's breath left her in a trembling exhale. And if they are not released, he continued, they do not remain beneath the floor. The bundle twitched. A faint, wet sound seeped from within the cloth, like air moving through something that had forgotten how to breathe. The monk shut his eyes and began to chant under his breath. Take it away from the temple. He whispered urgently. I cannot keep it here. This ground was consecrated to guide souls onward, not to imprison them. Kanya's hands shook as she gathered the bundle again. It felt heavier now, dense with damp warmth. As she turned to leave, the monk spoke once more. If you hear them call you mother, he said, do not answer. She stopped at the threshold. Behind her, the oil lamp went out. In the darkness that followed, something in the bundle let out a thin, congested whimper. And deep inside her womb, something shifted in response. Chapter 6. The Woman Without a Shadow. By late afternoon, the heat over Ban Nong Phai thickened into a dull, metallic haze. The sky had turned the color of tarnished brass, and the sugarcane fields shimmered as if seen through a fever dream. Kanya walked the narrow path back from the temple, clutching the red bundle to her chest despite the monk's warning to keep it away from holy ground. She had tried to leave it behind. Twice. Both times, a crushing pressure seized her abdomen, forcing her to double over as if invisible hands were wringing the breath from her lungs. The pain eased only when she picked the bundle up again. So now she carried it like something that owned her. The village seemed emptier than before. Doors were shut, windows sealed, even the dogs that had lazed beneath the stilted houses the day before were gone. The silence did not feel natural, it felt expectant, as if the entire village held its breath. Halfway home, she sensed it. Not a sound. A presence. The feeling of being watched from just beyond the reach of sight. She stopped walking. The baby inside her shifted slowly, pressing downward with a heavy, deliberate weight. Kanya turned toward the sugarcane fields. At first, she saw only the tall, dull green blades swaying without wind. Then a shape separated itself from the stillness. A woman stood among the cane. She wore a long white dress stained the color of old water. Her hair hung forward in thick black strands that obscured her face. The fabric of her sleeves fluttered slightly, though the air remained unmoving. Kanya's breath caught. The distance between them could not have been more than 20 meters. Yet the woman did not seem entirely present, her outline wavered, as if seen through rising heat. Kanya's gaze dropped to the ground. The lowering sun cast long shadows across the path. Her own shadow stretched toward the fields. The woman cast none. A sudden, crushing tightness gripped Kanya's abdomen. She gasped, clutching her belly as the baby jerked violently inside her. The sensation felt less like movement and more like resistance, like something within her recoiling in terror. When she looked up again, the woman had not moved. But the cane around her had bent inward, forming a narrow corridor that pointed directly toward Kanya, as though the field itself had parted to make a path. The air grew colder. A faint odor drifted toward her, damp soil, stagnant water, and the sour sweetness of spoiled milk. Her feet refused to move. The bundle in her arms had grown warm. No, not warm. Hot. Through the cloth, she felt a faint trembling, like something inside shifting against its bindings. The woman's head tilted slowly to one side, though her face remained hidden behind curtains of hair. Kanya felt the unmistakable pressure of a gaze settling onto her swollen belly. The baby inside her rolled once, a slow, unnatural motion, and then pressed outward so firmly that the skin stretched tight beneath her dress. A whisper crossed the distance between them. Not carried by wind. Not shaped by breath. It arrived directly inside her ears. Thin and wet. "You kept them?" Kanya staggered backward. The cane leaves rustled, though the air remained still. The woman took one step forward. Her movement was wrong, too smooth, too gliding, as though her feet did not fully meet the ground. The smell intensified. Rot. Milk. Wet earth freshly opened. Kanya's pulse thundered in her skull. She forced her legs to move, stumbling backward along the path. The bundle in her arms twitched again, releasing a faint congested whimper. The woman stopped. Her head tilted further, bending at an angle no neck should allow. "Give them warmth," the whisper seeped into Kanya's hearing. A sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. The world tilted, her vision narrowed. Inside her womb, something pressed downward with unbearable weight, not like a child settling, but like a second presence forcing its way toward life. Kanya turned and fled. She did not remember the path home. The village blurred into streaks of wood and shadow as panic drove her forward. Only when she slammed the door behind her and dropped the bolt into place did she realize she had been holding her breath. The house was silent. Too silent. Her chest heaved as she backed away from the door. Sweat slid down her spine despite the chill clinging to her skin. Outside, the cane fields whispered softly. She forced herself to look through the slats of the wooden wall. The path was empty. No footprints. No movement. Nothing. Yet as she turned away, the bundle in her arms emitted a thin, congested cry, weak, hungry, and unbearably close. And from somewhere just beyond the house, where the cane met the edge of the clearing, a second whisper answered. Waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The Children Who Never Grew. Rain clouds gathered over Ban Nong Phai that evening. Yet no rain fell. The sky darkened prematurely, pressing low over the sugarcane fields until the air felt heavy enough to drink. Inside her mother's house, Kanya sat rigid beside the small oil lamp, unable to shake the sensation that the walls were leaning closer with each passing hour. She had barred the door before sunset. Still, she did not feel alone. The bundle lay wrapped in cloth on the floor across the room. She had placed it as far from her sleeping mat as possible. Yet she remained aware of it, the way one remains aware of an open wound. It had not stopped trembling. A soft knock sounded against the outer wall. Kanya froze. Not the door. The wall. 3 slow taps. Then silence. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to stand, each movement careful, as though sudden motion might attract attention from something listening just beyond the wooden boards. She slid the bolt and opened the door a crack. An old woman stood beneath the eaves, her thin shoulders hunched against a wind that did not blow. Kanya recognized her as May Prang, one of the oldest residents of the village, a woman whose age no one could name and whose memory stretched further than anyone else's dared. "You saw her," May Prang said. It was not a question. Kanya's fingers tightened on the doorframe. "In the fields." The old woman nodded slowly, as if confirming something long expected. "I told them she would return when the bindings weakened." Kanya's pulse quickened. "Who is she?" May Prang did not step inside. Instead, she lowered herself onto the wooden step, bones creaking audibly, and stared out toward the darkening cane fields. "We did not begin with bindings," she said. "We began with graves." The air seemed to thicken. "In the year of the long sickness," she continued, "infants died before their first moon. Their lungs filled, their skin cooled, their cries stopped before mothers could learn their voices. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on her knees. We buried them at the edge of the cane. 1, then 3, then dozens. The oil lamp flickered behind Kanya, throwing a long shadow across the threshold. At night, the mothers heard crying from the burial ground. May Prang said, "Not loud, not strong, but enough to pull them from sleep and draw them into the fields." Kanya's skin prickled. They dug with bare hands. The old woman whispered. They thought their babies were still alive beneath the soil. Her breath rattled softly. They found nothing that breathed. Silence stretched between them. The sugarcane leaves rasped faintly against one another, though the air remained still. When the ritual master came, May Prang continued. He said the land had grown hungry. That something beneath the earth fed on first breath and new warmth. The bundle inside the house released a faint, wet rustle. May Prang did not look toward it. He taught us to bind the souls of the dead infants, she said, to hold them between worlds so they could guard the living. Kanya swallowed. And it worked. Yes, the old woman said. The word fell like a stone. No more infants died. Her voice thinned. But the crying did not stop. A slow chill crept up Kanya's spine. At first, only mothers heard it, May Prang said. Then pregnant women. Then children began to speak of playmates no one could see. She turned her head slightly. When we walked through the cane at dusk, we heard footsteps keeping pace beside us. The darkness beyond the yard seemed to thicken. We stopped going out after sunset. She continued. We stopped listening. We told ourselves silence meant peace. The oil lamp behind Kanya sputtered. But the children, May Prang whispered. The bound ones, they did not grow. Kanya's breath caught. They remained hungry, the old woman said. Hungry for warmth, for breath, for the rhythm of a mother's heart. The bundle inside the house twitched. A faint congested whimper seeped through the wall. May Prang closed her eyes briefly. When the bindings weaken, she said, they seek new life. The baby inside Kanya pressed downward with slow, relentless weight. And the woman? Kanya asked, her voice barely sound. May Prang's gaze drifted toward the cane fields, now swallowed by deepening dusk. She was the first mother to refuse the binding, she said. She buried her child whole and would not let them take him. A distant rustle moved through the cane, a narrow passage parting through the stalks. They found her wandering the fields 3 nights later. May Prang continued. She carried something wrapped in cloth. She would not let anyone see it. The air grew colder. By morning, the old woman whispered. She had no shadow. Kanya's grip tightened on the doorframe. What happened to her child? She asked. May Prang did not answer. Instead, she rose slowly to her feet. The cane remembers where we buried them, she said. The land remembers what we kept. She turned to leave, her small figure dissolving into the dimness. At the edge of the yard, she stopped. If they call you mother, she said without turning, it is because they have chosen you. Then she walked into the darkness, and the cane closed behind her with a dry whisper. Inside the house, the bundle began to tremble more violently. From deep beneath the floorboards, a thin chorus of muffled cries rose, not one voice, but many. And inside her womb, Kanya felt something shift in answer. Not a kick. Not a movement. A reaching. Chapter 8. The Ritual Beneath the New Moon. Night fell without a sunset. One moment the sky above Ban Nong Phai was a dull iron gray, the next. Darkness sealed the land as though a lid had been lowered over the world. No moon rose. No stars appeared. The new moon night left the sky blank and depthless, a ceiling of black that seemed to press downward on the village roofs. Kanya had not intended to leave the house. Yet sometime after midnight, she found herself standing. She did not remember rising. The oil lamp had burned out, leaving the room submerged in thick darkness. The air was damp and faintly warm, carrying the odor of wet soil and stale incense. From beneath the floorboards came a low vibration, not sound, but a pulsing resonance that trembled through her bare feet. The bundle lay in her hands. She did not remember picking it up. Outside, something whispered through the cane. Not wind. A rhythm. A soft, synchronized rustle, as if many bodies moved slowly in unison. Her feet carried her to the door. The bolt slid free beneath her fingers with a soft scrape. The door opened without a creak, as though it had been waiting. The village lay in unnatural darkness. No lamps burned, no dogs barked, no human voices broke the night. Yet the path ahead was visible. Not with light, but with a dim, gray clarity, as if the ground itself remembered the shape of footsteps. She walked. The baby inside her pressed downward with a steady weight, each step accompanied by a tightening pull deep in her abdomen, as though something below the earth drew both mother and child toward it. The path led beyond the last houses. Into the cane. The stalks parted as she approached, bending inward to form a narrow corridor. Their dry leaves brushed her arms with a papery hiss, leaving trails of cold dampness on her skin. The smell intensified. Rot. Milk turned sour. Wet earth newly opened. Ahead, the corridor widened into a clearing. Villagers stood in a circle. Men, women, elders, all silent. Their faces were dim shapes in the light of low burning oil bowls placed along the ground. No one spoke. No one acknowledged her arrival. Their eyes remained fixed on the center of the clearing. Kanya stepped forward without intending to. At the center lay an old wooden cradle, its surface darkened by age and oil. The wood was deeply scratched, as though fingernails had scraped against it from within. The cradle rocked slowly, though no hand touched it. Back and forth. Back and forth. A thin, congested whimper seeped from its hollow interior. Around the cradle, red cloth bundles had been arranged in a perfect circle, each tied with ritual cord. Dozens of them, perhaps more. The cloth surfaces were stiff and darkened, as if soaked long ago and left to dry without washing. Ash drifted from one bundle as it trembled. A man stepped forward carrying a shallow brass bowl filled with smoldering resin. Thick, bitter smoke rose, coiling into the still air without dispersing. He circled the cradle slowly, chanting under his breath in a language older than the village itself, syllables heavy and guttural, shaped in the throat rather than the tongue. The vibration beneath the ground intensified. Kanya felt it through her soles, through her bones, through the fluid that cradled the child within her. The bundle in her hands grew hot. A wet rustle came from inside it. The chanting deepened. One by one, the villagers knelt. Their foreheads touched the earth. The cradle rocked faster. From within it came a layered sound, not one cry, but many, overlapping and breathless, as though dozens of tiny lungs strained for air that would not come. Kanya's abdomen tightened violently. She gasped, doubling forward as a crushing downward pressure seized her womb. The sensation was unbearable, not labor, not pain, but force. Drawing. Pulling. Summoning. The man with the incense lifted both hands and spoke a final phrase. The villagers pressed their palms flat to the earth. The ground answered. A low, hollow exhale rose from beneath the clearing. The red bundles trembled in unison. From the cane beyond the circle, a figure emerged. The woman in white. Her hair hung forward, hiding her face. Her dress clung wetly to her limbs as if soaked from within. She moved without sound, gliding across the dirt until she stood at the edge of the circle. No one looked at her. Yet the cradle stilled. The air grew colder. A whisper seeped through the clearing, thin as breath forced through water. Warmth. The bundles twitched. Kanya's grip failed. The red bundle fell from her hands and struck the ground inside the circle. Every head lifted. Not toward her face. Toward her belly. The baby inside her convulsed, pressing downward with terrifying strength. Her skin stretched tight beneath her dress as if something beneath it pushed outward, seeking air. The woman in white tilted her head. The smell of wet soil thickened. From beneath the ground came the faint, congested inhalation of something that had waited too long to breathe. The cradle began to rock again. And in the suffocating darkness beneath the new moon, Kanya understood with dawning horror. This was not a ritual of protection. It was a ritual of feeding.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. The Hands Beneath the Earth. The cradle rocked faster. Back and forth. Back and forth. Its dry wooden frame began to emit a thin, splintering creak that cut through the suffocating silence like bone grinding against bone. The oil bowls flickered violently, their flames bending inward toward the circle as if drawn by breath rising from below. Kanya could not move. Her feet felt fused to the soil. Her abdomen tightened with unbearable pressure, the muscles clenching in waves that did not resemble labor but seizure, an inward pulling force. As though the ground itself had hooked into her womb and begun to draw. The villagers remained kneeling, foreheads pressed to earth, their shoulders trembling in silent rhythm with the cradle's motion. The red bundle shuddered. Then the ground shifted. Not a tremor. A soft loosening. The packed dirt within the ritual circle darkened, moisture rising through it as though something beneath exhaled warm breath into the soil. The smell thickened instantly, wet clay, rot, stagnant milk, and the iron tang of long-buried decay. A thin crack opened in the earth. Another. Then another. The soil did not split apart violently, it softened, sagging inward like flesh yielding beneath pressure. From the nearest fissure, something pale pressed upward. Kanya's breath locked in her throat. A fingertip emerged. Small. Gray-white. Its skin wrinkled and translucent like something that had soaked too long in water. The nail was soft, barely formed. Another finger followed. Then another. Tiny hands forced their way through the soil, pushing upward with slow, desperate insistence. The earth clung to them in wet clumps as they emerged, grasping blindly at the air they could not fill their lungs with. The cradle rattled violently. From within it came layered cries, thin, congested, overlapping, a chorus of suffocated breath. More hands surfaced. Dozens. Some no larger than a coin. Others the size of a newborn's palm. Their fingers flexed weakly, clawing at nothing, trembling with effort that could never become strength. The villagers did not move. They pressed their heads lower. The man with the incense began chanting again, his voice strained, forcing each syllable through a throat thick with fear. The woman in white stood unmoving at the edge of the circle. Her head tilted farther, watching. The bundle at Kanya's feet twitched violently. Something inside struck against the cloth with soft, wet impacts. Kanya tried to step back. Her legs refused. A crushing downward force seized her abdomen. She screamed as the sensation intensified, not pain alone, but pressure from within, as if something inside her pressed outward in answer to the reaching hands below. The skin across her belly rippled. A slow, rolling movement traveled beneath it. Not the motion of a single child, but of shifting bodies. Her scream broke into ragged sobs. From the earth, the tiny hands began turning toward her. They did not see. They sensed. Their fingers trembled in the air, then oriented slowly in her direction, reaching with weak, relentless hunger. Warm, a whisper seeped through the clearing. Mother. The word spread among the layered cries, multiplying until it became a breathless chorus rising from the soil. Mother. 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 The cradle jerked sharply. The wood cracked. A fissure split along its side. From the opening, gray ash seeped outward like slow smoke. The incense bearer faltered in his chanting. The flames in the oil bowls shrank. The ground pulsed beneath Kanya's feet. Inside her womb, the pressure intensified until her vision fractured into bursts of white. She felt movement low in her abdomen, not the child descending toward birth, but something aligning, turning, making space. One of the tiny hands reached her foot. Its touch was barely weight. Yet the cold that entered her flesh traveled instantly through bone and blood. A chill so deep it stole the air from her lungs. More hands strained upward, brushing her ankles, her calves, leaving trails of damp cold that seeped through skin and muscle alike. She could not step away. She could not pull free. The woman in white took a silent step forward. The air collapsed inward. Give, warmth. The whisper slid through Kanya's skull like wet silk. The bundle at her feet split slightly at the seam. A gray puff of ash escaped. The hands reaching from the soil trembled harder, their movements gaining urgency, not strength, but desperation sharpened into need. The chanting broke. The cradle shattered. The oil flames guttered to threads of light. And as the first thin wail rose from directly beneath her feet, Kanya realized with a terror so vast it hollowed her from within. The earth was not releasing them. It was lifting them toward her. Chapter 10. The Child in the Mirror. Kanya did not remember leaving the clearing. She remembered the hands. The cold. The chorus of breathless cries pressing into her bones. After that, the world fractured into fragments, cane leaves scraping her arms. The taste of iron in her mouth. The sound of her own heartbeat pounding too loudly in her ears. When awareness returned, she was inside the house. The door was bolted. The oil lamp burned low beside the wall. Her dress was damp with soil. Her feet were streaked with gray mud that had dried into fine cracks across her skin. She did not remember walking home. The bundle lay near the doorway. Its cloth seam loosened, gray ash dusting the wooden floor like frost. Kanya staggered toward the wash basin, her limbs trembling as if she had been running for hours. Her abdomen throbbed with deep, pulsing pressure, not contractions, not pain, but a heavy internal weight that shifted when she breathed. She splashed water onto her face. The liquid felt too cold, too thick, as if it resisted flowing across her skin. She lifted her head slowly. The mirror above the basin was old, its silver backing mottled with black veins where age had eaten into its surface. The oil lamp's weak flame trembled behind her, casting a dim amber glow that seemed too thin to reach the glass. At first, she saw only herself. Pale skin stretched tight over her cheekbones. Dark crescents beneath her eyes. Hair clinging damply to her temples. Her belly swollen and taut beneath her dress. Then the flame flickered, and something shifted behind her reflection. Kanya froze. Her breath clouded the glass. Behind her, over her left shoulder, a shape emerged in the mirror's depth. Small. Still. Wrapped in dimness. She did not turn. She could not. Slowly, the shape sharpened. An infant. Its skin gray and faintly translucent. Stretched thin over delicate bones. Its limbs were too slender. The joints too sharp beneath the surface. Its chest did not rise. Where its eyes should have been were smooth hollows, sealed beneath a thin membrane of skin. Its mouth hung open in a silent cry. No breath came. No sound emerged. Yet the air around Kanya thickened with the pressure of a scream that could not escape. Her heartbeat roared. The infant did not blink. Did not breathe. Did not move. Then its head tilted slightly, as if listening to something deep within her body. Inside her womb, the baby shifted. A slow, deliberate turning. The movement pressed outward with disturbing firmness, distorting the smooth curve of her abdomen as if a small elbow, or something sharper, dragged along the inner wall of her flesh. Kanya gasped. The infant's mouth stretched wider. The skin around it cracked faintly at the corners, as though the flesh were too dry to contain the opening. A thin sound reached her ears. Not from the room. From inside her skull. A wet, congested inhalation. The mirror dimmed. The infant leaned closer from the depth of the glass, its hollow face angling toward her belly. Its small hand lifted, pressed against the inside surface of the mirror. The glass did not fog beneath its touch. Instead, a faint imprint appeared, as though something damp and cold pressed from the other side. Inside her womb, the pressure intensified. Something rolled slowly beneath her skin. Not a kick. Not a stretch. A shifting mass. Her reflection trembled. For an instant, her belly appeared to ripple, as though more than one shape pressed outward beneath the surface. Kanya stumbled backward, knocking the basin. Water sloshed across the floorboards. When she looked back at the mirror, she was alone. The infant was gone. Only her own reflection stared back, pale, shaking, eyes wide with rising hysteria. Behind her, the bundle emitted a faint rustling sound. A thin line of gray ash seeped from the loosened seam. Then came the cry. Not from the mirror. Not from the bundle. From within her. A faint, breathless whimper echoed through her abdomen, vibrating along her spine and into her throat, where it dissolved into a choked sob she could not release. Her hands flew to her belly. The skin was warm. Too warm. Beneath her palms, something shifted slowly in answer. From the far corner of the room, the oil lamp flickered low. The walls creaked softly. And in the dimness thickening around her, Kanya realized with creeping horror. The reflection had not shown her what stood behind her. It had shown her what was trying to come through.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. Whispers Beneath the Skin. The crying did not stop. It did not grow louder. Nor did it fade. It remained inside her. A thin, breathless whimper threading through her bones. Vibrating behind her ribs. Lingering in the hollow spaces of her skull like trapped air searching for escape. Kanya did not sleep. She sat against the wall with her knees drawn close. Arms wrapped around her swollen belly as if holding herself together. The oil lamp had burned dry hours ago. Yet darkness in the house was not complete. A faint gray luminescence seeped through the floorboards. Rising from beneath the house like diluted moonlight filtering through deep water. Her skin felt wrong. Too tight. Too thin. Every movement pulled at her flesh as though it were stretched over shapes not meant to fit within it. She pressed her palm against her abdomen. Something shifted in response. Not a kick. Not a roll. A slow sliding motion. Like bodies turning in confined space. Her breath fractured into shallow gasps. From beneath her skin came a faint rustling. At first she thought it was fabric moving against her belly. But the sound continued when she stilled. A delicate, dry friction. Like tiny fingertips brushing the inside of her flesh. No, she whispered. The word barely formed. A pressure traveled beneath her skin just above her navel. The surface lifted slightly, then smoothed again, leaving behind a faint rippling distortion that vanished too quickly to confirm. Her fingers trembled. She pressed harder. The movement returned. This time lower. Something glided slowly beneath her palm, following the heat of her touch. Her stomach clenched in revulsion. Inside her womb, the heavy downward force remained constant, as if gravity itself had increased, pulling everything within her toward the earth beneath the house. The whisper came then, not through her ears, but through her nerves. Thin. Wet. Breathless. Warm. Her spine stiffened. Mother. The sound multiplied. Layered voices, faint and overlapping, vibrating through muscle and bone rather than air. Her skin prickled violently. Beneath the surface of her abdomen, faint lines appeared, delicate ridges pressing outward from within, tracing slow arcs beneath her flesh before sinking back into the deeper layers. She gasped and clawed at her dress. The fabric clung damply to her skin. The air smelled faintly of sour milk and wet clay. The ridges appeared again. Not random. 5 slender lines pressed outward in unison, forming the unmistakable impression of tiny fingers spreading against the inner wall of her body. Kanya screamed. The shape vanished instantly. Her abdomen fell still. Only the echo of the movement remained, a phantom memory vibrating beneath her skin. Her pulse hammered in her throat. The whispers returned, threading through her bloodstream like cold threads pulled through warm wax. We are cold? No breath. Hold us. Her vision blurred with tears. She pressed both hands over her ears. But the voices did not fade. They were not outside. They were traveling through her. Her back arched suddenly as a wave of pressure rolled across her womb. A visible distortion traveled from one side of her abdomen to the other. As though something within had shifted position in answer to a call she could not hear. Her breathing shattered into ragged sobs. I can't, she whispered. I can't hold you. The floorboards beneath her released a long, hollow creak. From below, a faint chorus answered. Not loud. Not pleading. Hungry. The bundle near the doorway twitched, releasing a soft puff of gray ash that drifted across the floor like dust disturbed from a long-closed tomb. The whispers softened. Mother knows. Her skin tingled violently. Beneath her ribs, a slow pressing movement radiated outward, not toward the surface, but downward, aligning with the relentless pull toward the earth below the house. Kanya's arms wrapped around herself as if to keep her body from opening. Her nails dug into her skin. She could feel their cold. Her own flesh no longer felt entirely hers. In the dim gray glow rising through the floorboards, she saw faint movements beneath the surface of her abdomen, subtle distortions that traveled slowly, deliberately, as if small shapes turned toward warmth they could not generate. Tears slid soundlessly down her temples. The whispers softened to breath. "Stay. Warm. Mother." Her heart pounded against her ribs with suffocating force. And as another slow ripple passed beneath her skin, not painful, not violent, but deliberate, Kanya understood with mounting dread. Whatever was inside her was no longer waiting. It was settling in. Chapter 12. When the crying filled the house. The first cry did not come from below. It came from the walls. Kanya jerked upright, breath snagging in her throat as a thin, breathless wail slipped through the wooden slats beside her. It was faint, no louder than air escaping a cracked reed, yet it vibrated with desperate effort, as if shaped by lungs that could not fill. She held still. Silence returned. Then another cry answered from the opposite wall. Then a third, thinner and more strained, seeped through the ceiling beams. Her pulse hammered violently. The sound was not echoing. It was multiplying. The house exhaled a long, hollow creak. From beneath the floorboards, the gray luminescence intensified, seeping through the cracks between planks like diluted milk rising through dark water. The faint glow illuminated drifting ash scattered across the floor, each grain trembling as though stirred by breath rising from below. The crying returned. Not one voice. Many. Layered, thin, congested, each cry breaking before it could become sound. The noise did not fill the room so much as seep into it, saturating the air until it felt thick enough to swallow. Kanya pressed her hands over her ears. It did nothing. The sound bypassed hearing. It vibrated through the wood, through her spine, through the fluid weight in her womb. Her abdomen tightened sharply. Beneath her skin, a slow ripple traveled from left to right, not violent, not frantic, but responsive. Answering. The bundle near the doorway trembled, releasing a faint stream of gray ash that drifted along the floorboards like smoke unable to rise. The crying intensified. From the ceiling. From the walls. From beneath the floor. From the hollow spaces inside the wood. A faint dampness spread across the planks near her feet. Dark patches appeared as if moisture seeped upward from below. The smell followed immediately, wet soil freshly opened, sour milk turned in heat, and the faint iron tang of long-decayed blood. The temperature dropped. Her breath fogged faintly in the dim gray glow. Something shifted within the walls. Not rodents. Not settling timber. A soft, congested scraping, like small bodies dragging against narrow spaces too tight for movement. The cries began to overlap, forming a thin, wavering chorus that pressed inward from all directions. Mother. The whisper did not come from one place. It came from the air itself. Kanya's back struck the wall as she recoiled, her breath breaking into panicked gasps. The wood behind her vibrated faintly, a low trembling resonance that pulsed in time with the layered cries. The gray glow beneath the floor brightened. For a brief, impossible instant, shadows moved within it. Small. Distorted. Pressing upward against the boards before dissolving back into shifting light. Her abdomen convulsed. A slow, dragging movement traveled low across her womb, followed by a second, smaller shift that lagged behind the first. Her vision swam. Cold. The whisper threaded through her nerves. No breath. The crying swelled, filling the hollow spaces of the house until the air seemed saturated with grief that had never been released. The door shuddered. Not from impact. From pressure. As if something outside leaned its full weight against the wood. The crying paused. Silence struck the room like a held breath. A faint sound emerged from the threshold. A soft, wet inhalation. Kanya's heart pounded so violently she felt it in her teeth. The door bowed inward slightly, its wooden fibers creaking under slow, steady force. From the cracks between the planks, thin gray vapor seeped through. curling along the floor like breath escaping from a sealed grave. The cries resumed, louder now. No longer distant. Hungry. The bundle split further along its seam. Ash spilled outward in a thin stream, drifting toward her feet as though drawn by heat. Her abdomen tightened again. The skin stretched taut beneath her dress. For a moment, the surface rippled, multiple subtle distortions pressing outward before smoothing again. Her breath shattered. "I can't hold you," she whispered. The crying softened. Not comforted. Expectant. The gray glow beneath the floor pulsed slowly, like the steady rhythm of a heart buried deep underground. The house creaked in long, resonant tones, its beams answering the vibration rising from the earth below. Kanya realized she could no longer distinguish where the sound ended and her own pulse began. The crying was inside the walls. Inside the floor. Inside the air. Inside her. And as the chorus swelled once more, thin, breathless, and endlessly hungry, she understood with suffocating clarity. The house was not haunted. It was answering.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Night of Blood and Memory. The night thickened until the air felt viscous, heavy enough to drag against each breath. Kanya did not remember deciding to leave the house. She only realized she was walking when the door stood open behind her and the gray-lit floorboards fell away into darkness. The crying that had filled the walls now seemed to pull from a single direction, toward the cane fields. Toward the place where the earth had softened and the cradle had split. The bundle lay abandoned behind her. Yet the warmth in her abdomen deepened with each step. The village remained sealed in silence. No lamps burned, no voices called. The houses stood like dark husks, their windows blind and watchless. But as she passed, she felt a tension gathering behind the walls, not movement, not sound, but the weight of listening. The path into the cane opened before her without resistance. The stalks leaned away as she approached, forming a corridor through the tall, whispering blades. Their leaves brushed her shoulders, leaving trails of damp cold that soaked into her skin. The smell returned. Wet soil. Spoiled milk. And beneath it, the unmistakable copper tang of fresh blood. The clearing waited. The oil bowls had burned low, their flames reduced to trembling blue threads. Smoke hung close to the ground, unmoving. The cradle lay shattered at the center. Its broken frame collapsed inward like ribs crushed by weight from above. The red bundles remained in a circle around it. But the circle was broken. Several cloth wrappings had split open. Gray ash spilled outward in dark streaks across the dirt, dampened by moisture seeping from the soil below. The villagers were already there. They stood rather than knelt, their faces pale in the dim light, eyes hollow and fixed upon the ground. No one spoke, their mouths hung slightly open, as though breath had become difficult. The incense bearer stood at the edge of the broken circle, the brass bowl hanging limp in his hand. The resin within had burned to black crust. The woman in white stood opposite him. Closer now. Her dress clung to her body as though soaked from within. Dark stains spread across the fabric at her chest and along her thighs. Wet and slowly deepening, her hair hung forward in thick strands, dripping faint threads of dark fluid that vanished before touching the earth. No shadow lay at her feet. Kanya stepped into the clearing. The ground beneath her foot gave slightly, as if the soil had lost its firmness. Her abdomen tightened. A deep, dragging pressure pulled downward, heavy and insistent. The air shuddered. From beneath the broken cradle, a slow seep of liquid darkness spread into the dirt, thick and viscous. It glistened faintly in the oil light. Blood. But too dark. Too dense. It did not soak into the soil. It pooled. The villagers inhaled in unison, a thin, tremulous sound. Memories surfaced. Not her own. Hands digging into wet earth. Mothers clawing soil from shallow graves. Cloth bundles tied with shaking fingers. Ash pressed into red fabric. Infant hair wrapped in ritual cord. The smell of decay masked by incense smoke. Fear disguised as protection. The images did not pass before her eyes. They bloomed inside her skull. Her knees buckled. The pressure in her womb surged. Her vision fractured into flashes of dim lamplight. Crying women, and dirt-streaked hands pressing tiny bundles into the ground beneath stilted houses. The villagers began to murmur. Not speech. Not prayer. A low, wavering hum, as though their throats vibrated in answer to something rising beneath the soil. The woman in white lifted her head. Her hair parted. For an instant, Kanya saw the hollow darkness where eyes should have been, not empty, but depthless, like pits carved into shadow. Her mouth opened. Too wide. The smell of wet clay thickened. They buried breath, the whisper seeped through the clearing. The earth pulsed. From the broken circle, small impressions appeared in the soil, depressions forming as if unseen weight pressed upward from below. The villagers staggered. Some fell to their knees. Others clutched their chests, gasping as if the air had thinned. The dark liquid pooling beneath the cradle trembled. Then it began to move. Not flowing. Drawing inward. Returning to the split earth. Kanya screamed as a violent pressure tore through her abdomen. Her belly tightened to stone. The skin stretching tight enough to burn. Beneath the surface, a slow, heavy shifting pressed downward, not the descent of one child, but the alignment of many. The murmuring rose in pitch. The soil within the circle softened. Tiny indentations appeared. Then handprints. Pressing upward. The woman in white took a step forward. The air collapsed inward with her movement. Remember, the whisper threaded through bone and blood. Images surged through Kanya's mind, the first mother clutching her dead child. Refusing the binding, wandering the cane fields with something wrapped against her chest. Refusing to surrender warmth to ash and cord. Her scream tore into the night. The villagers' hum broke into sobs. The earth opened. Not violently. Slowly. Yielding. The smell of blood thickened until the air tasted metallic. Beneath her feet, something shifted in answer. The downward pressure in her womb became unbearable, as if gravity itself had deepened, pulling life toward the opening earth. The woman in white raised one hand. The murmuring ceased. Silence crashed down. In that suffocating stillness, Kanya understood with absolute, bone-deep certainty. The ritual had never ended. It had only been waiting for breath to return. And tonight, the earth intended to reclaim it. Chapter 14. The Breaking of the Circle. The earth did not roar. It yielded. Slowly, heavily, like flesh parting beneath pressure that had waited too long to be released. The broken circle of red bundles trembled as the soil within it softened into dark, breathing mud. The last threads of oil flame flickered low, turning the clearing into a dim, pulsing twilight where shadows did not fall correctly and distance felt distorted. Kanya could not step backward. The ground held her. Her abdomen tightened into a hard, unyielding mass as the downward force within her intensified. The pressure was no longer rhythmic, it was constant, relentless, dragging everything inside her toward the opening earth. Around her, villagers wept openly now. Some rocked back and forth, palms pressed to their ears. Others bowed until their foreheads touched the dirt, murmuring apologies to names long forgotten. The woman in white stood at the edge of the yielding ground. Her hair hung parted now, revealing a face drained of all warmth, skin pale as soaked paper. Lips cracked and darkened, hollow sockets where eyes had been, filled not with emptiness but with depthless shadow. Her mouth opened slowly. The smell of wet clay thickened. They kept breath, the whisper slid through the clearing. The soil shifted. Small shapes pressed upward beneath the mud, not yet emerging, but present, their movement visible in slow distortions of the surface. Kanya screamed as a violent pressure tore through her womb. The skin of her abdomen stretched taut, the surface rippling as if something within turned in answer to the movement below. Not one shape. Several. The villagers began to chant, not in unison, not in ritual, but in fractured pleas. Forgive us. We were afraid. We wanted them to live. Their voices broke against the thick air and fell into the mud. The incense bearer dropped the brass bowl. It struck the ground with a dull clang that seemed swallowed before it could echo. The woman in white lifted her hand. Every sound ceased. Even the cane fields fell still. The mud within the circle darkened further, turning almost black. Thick bubbles formed at its surface, rising slowly before collapsing with soft, wet sighs. A tiny hand broke through. Then another. The fingers trembled weakly, coated in blackened mud, grasping at air that would not fill their lungs. Kanya's knees buckled. The downward force inside her became unbearable, a dragging pull that felt as if her spine were being drawn through her pelvis. Her breath forced downward toward the opening earth. Warmth, the whisper breathed through her bones. The tiny hands turned toward her. Reaching. The woman in white stepped closer, stopping just beyond the broken circle. Mud clung to the hem of her dress, spreading dark stains upward as though the earth itself tried to reclaim her. "Give warmth," she whispered. The baby within Kanya convulsed. Her abdomen rippled violently, the skin stretching as small protrusions pressed outward before sinking back into the depths of her womb. Her scream fractured into ragged sobs. "I can't," she cried. "I can't hold them all." The mud churned. More hands surfaced. Tiny wrists. Soft skull shapes pressing beneath the surface. The air filled with thin, breathless cries layered atop one another. A chorus of suffocation and need. The villagers collapsed to the ground, their wails rising in helpless terror. The woman in white tilted her head, listening, not to the cries, but to Kanya's heart hammering against her ribs. Memories surged through Kanya's mind. Mothers digging in the dark. Bundles tied with shaking hands. Ash used to replace breath. Fear chosen over farewell. The downward pressure in her womb sharpened into a tearing force. She fell to her knees at the edge of the mud. The tiny hands stretched toward her, trembling with desperate hunger for warmth they could not generate. Her palms hovered over the surface. Cold radiated upward. The whisper pressed into her skull. "Hold us." Behind the chorus of need, another memory surfaced, the first mother wandering the fields, refusing to surrender her child to binding cloth and ash, refusing to trade grief for imprisonment. Kanya's breath shuddered. The earth pulled. The voices begged. The child within her shifted, not downward now, but inward, pressing against her ribs as if seeking shelter from the pull below. Tears blurred her vision. Her hands trembled over the reaching fingers. "I release you," she whispered. The words scraped raw from her throat. The mud stilled. The cries faltered. The woman in white froze. Kanya pressed her palms into the cold earth. "I release you," she said again, louder, voice breaking. "We were wrong to keep you." A deep vibration rolled through the ground. The tiny hands paused mid-reach. The air thickened, then shifted. The pressure inside her womb changed, no longer dragging downward, but pulling inward, as if something had turned away from the opening earth. The mud began to sink. Not swallowing. Receiving. The hands lowered slowly, fingers relaxing as they slipped back beneath the surface. The cries softened into thin exhalations. The villagers sobbed. The woman in white stood motionless, her hollow gaze fixed upon Kanya. Breath, the whisper faded. The ground settled. The black mud darkened, then cooled, its surface smoothing into stillness. The oil flames flickered higher. Air rushed back into the clearing as if the world itself had been holding its breath. Kanya collapsed forward, her body trembling with exhaustion. Inside her womb, the heavy pressure eased for the first time. Only one steady movement remained. A single heartbeat. The woman in white lowered her hand. For a brief instant, her outline softened, edges dissolving like mist touched by morning light. Then she turned and walked into the cane. The stalks parted. Closed. Silence remained. The villagers knelt in the mud, weeping into the earth they had feared and fed. Kanya lay at the edge of the circle, breath shuddering, palms still pressed into cooling soil. The night air moved across her skin. Warm. For the first time since her return, the smell of rot began to fade. But deep beneath the quiet, the earth still held memory. And memory does not forget.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. When the Lullaby Returned. Morning arrived slowly over Ban Nong Phai, like light hesitant to touch the land. Mist clung low to the sugarcane fields, drifting in pale ribbons between the stalks. The air no longer carried the sour weight of rot or the damp breath of opened earth. Instead, a thin coolness lingered, fragile, uncertain, as if the world were relearning how to breathe. Kanya awoke on a woven mat inside her mother's house. She did not remember who had carried her back. Sunlight filtered through the shutters in narrow golden bands, illuminating floating dust motes that drifted lazily in the still air. The gray luminescence that once seeped through the floorboards was gone. The wood lay quiet, inert, no longer vibrating with buried breath. For a long moment, she did not move. Her hands rested over her abdomen. Warm. Calm. Within, a single steady movement answered her touch. Not dragging. Not dividing. One presence. One heartbeat. Tears slipped soundlessly into her hair. Outside, the village stirred. Doors opened. Footsteps crossed packed earth. Muted voices spoke for the first time in nights. Low and uncertain, as though sound itself might still be fragile. No one mentioned what had happened. But the villagers moved differently now, slower, softer, as if mindful of the ground beneath their feet. By midday, the oil bowls had been removed from the clearing. The broken cradle was gone. The soil lay smooth and dark, newly turned and undisturbed. No red bundles remained. Only a faint ring of flattened earth marked where the circle had been. No one stepped inside it. Mei prang past Kanya on the path and paused. The old woman studied her face for a long time, then nodded once, not in greeting, but in acknowledgement. "They're quiet," she said. Kanya swallowed. "Gone?" Mei prang's gaze drifted toward the cane fields. "Released," she answered. The word hung between them, fragile as mist. That evening, the sky burned briefly with color before fading into a soft indigo dusk. For the first time since her return, Kanya left the windows open as night approached. Crickets began their hesitant song. A breeze moved through the cane, carrying the dry whisper of leaves brushing one another, no longer synchronized. No longer purposeful, but natural, uneven, alive. Darkness settled. She lay on the mat, one hand resting over her belly, listening to the unfamiliar comfort of ordinary night sounds. At first, she thought she imagined it. A faint cry. Thin. New. Alive. It came from a neighboring house. Then another answered from farther down the path. Not suffocated. Not breathless. Full lunged wails of newborn life discovering air for the first time. Kanya's chest tightened. Tears slid warm into her ears. A soft melody rose into the night. A mother's voice, unsteady at first, then strengthening, a lullaby carried through open windows and drifting over the village like something long forbidden and suddenly remembered. The sound trembled, broke, and continued. Another voice joined it. Then another. Ban Nong Phai, silent for so many years, filled with the fragile music of mothers singing their children to sleep. Kanya closed her eyes. Inside her, the child shifted gently, settling deeper beneath her heart. Outside, the lullabies continued, weaving through the warm night air. Near the edge of the cane fields, where mist gathered in pale threads above the dark soil, the breeze paused briefly, just long enough to stir the leaves in a soft, circular motion. If anyone had been watching, they might have noticed the faintest impression forming in the mist, small shapes drifting upward like breath released at last. And beneath the lullabies, so soft it might have been mistaken for the settling of night air, a whisper moved through the cane. A sound not of hunger, but of gratitude. The breeze passed. The leaves fell still. The lullabies went on. And though the earth of Ban Nong Phai held memory deep within its dark layers, the night no longer listened for suffocated cries. It listened to breathing. Ban Nong Phai is quiet now. Lullabies have returned to the night, and mothers no longer fear the sound of their babies crying. But the earth does not forget what was once buried within it. And on moonless nights, when the wind stops moving through the cane fields, some villagers claim they still hear something faint. Not a cry. Not a voice. But the fragile breath of souls that once waited to be released. Because some things may be freed, but never truly leave.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.